I moved into my house 2 years ago. Quiet street, modest HOA, and a backyard big enough for my two rescue dogs. Everything felt peaceful at first. Sure, the HOA was annoying, but manageable. I kept my lawn trimmed, didn't blast music, and waved at neighbors just enough to be left alone. I knew about Karen, though. Everyone did. She was the self-declared face of the HOA, even though she wasn't president, just loud. She'd inspect garbage bins for rule violations and knock on doors if your grass was more than 2 inches tall. Still, she never really bothered me. That is, until my wife moved in. My wife and I had dated long distance for a while, and once she got a job transfer, she packed up and moved in with me. Nothing dramatic, just a U-Haul, some boxes, and her dog in the back seat. Karen was watching from her porch the entire time, arms folded, face twitching like she just smelled something foul. I gave her a friendly wave. She didn't wave back. Within 48 hours, the notices began. A formal letter taped to my door, unregistered tenant detected, unauthorized cohabitation violates HOA policy. That was weird. I checked the HOA agreement again. Nowhere did it say residents couldn't live with spouses. I responded politely, stating my wife was now a legal occupant and included a copy of the lease amendment. Karen replied with a handwritten note calling it suspiciously convenient. It didn't stop there. The next week, my wife's car got tagged with a bright orange unauthorized vehicle sticker, even though I'd registered it with the HOA office. A neighbor whispered that Karen called it in personally. Then came the knock at the door. Karen standing there, clipboard in hand. "I need to see your wife's identification," she said, smug and bold like this was her jurisdiction. My wife, confused but calm, asked why. "We've had cases of fraud, illegal tenants posing as spouses to access community privileges," Karen said, glancing at her like she was an invader. "You're accusing my wife of fraud?" I asked, stepping forward. Karen didn't even blink. "Not accusing, just following protocol." We slammed the door in her face. The next morning, we found Karen pacing outside our house, snapping pictures of our driveway, our trash bins, even my wife through the window like some budget version of a private investigator. We decided to ignore it until the cops showed up. 2 squad cars pulled into our cul-de-sac like there was a hostage situation. I opened the door and was met by a stern-looking officer asking to speak to my wife. Karen stood behind him, arms folded, smirking like she'd finally won. "She's being accused of impersonation and possible identity theft," the officer said. "There's been a formal report filed by your HOA." "What?" I shouted. "Impersonation? Of who?" Karen leaned in and said, "She's not on the property deed. She's not in the original HOA registration. You've let a complete stranger into our community without authorization, and she doesn't even look like she belongs here." My wife stood calm, even as the officers asked for her ID. I could see her jaw tighten, but she didn't say a word. She walked into the house, grabbed her wallet, and handed over her driver's license and supporting documents. The officers took them, cross-referenced everything, and one of them gave Karen a look like she'd just wasted everyone's time. "Everything checks out. She's legally residing here," he said flatly. Karen wasn't done. "What about her work ID? Her employment status? We don't allow people with unclear backgrounds to live here. It compromises security." One of the officers turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, this is not a gated military base. It's a suburban street." Karen's face turned beet red. "You'll regret letting her stay here. I'll make sure the HOA board hears about this. All of it." Over the next week, Karen's antics escalated. Our trash bins got mysteriously dumped over. HOA notices were left on our door almost daily. My wife's tires were slashed. Though no cameras caught it, we knew who was behind it. And every time we stepped outside, Karen watched us like a vulture. My wife remained quiet, strangely calm, like she was just waiting. I asked her why she didn't report Karen or fight back. She simply smiled and said, "Sometimes the best revenge is patience." I didn't get it then, but I would soon. Karen had turned our lives into a pressure cooker. Daily citations, HOA violation emails, noise complaints for nothing. She even sent a letter to my employer claiming I was illegally renting to an undocumented woman. That's how deep she was spiraling. But the more aggressive she got, the calmer my wife became. She'd leave post-it notes around the house with little reminders. "Breathe. It's almost time. Watch what happens." Then one evening, things exploded. We returned from grocery shopping to find three HOA board members standing in our driveway, led by none other than Karen. She pointed at my wife and declared, "We are issuing an emergency injunction. She needs to vacate this property immediately until we confirm her legal identity. The HOA cannot permit unknown individuals to reside here unvetted." My jaw dropped. "Are you serious right now?" "She doesn't belong here," Karen snapped. "She's a fraud, and I've already called the sheriff's office." My wife tilted her head and smiled, not like someone who was scared, like someone who'd just seen the final puzzle piece drop into place. "Oh?" she said calmly. "You want to confirm my identity?" Karen huffed. "Yes. For once in your life, tell the truth. Who are you?" My wife stepped forward, opened her purse, and pulled out a sleek black ID card. She handed it to the sheriff who had just arrived on scene. He glanced at it, then did a double take. His expression changed completely. "Ma'am," he said, now standing straighter, "thank you for your service." Karen squinted. What is it? What is that?" The sheriff turned to Karen, his tone now sharp. "That's a United States Department of Defense ID. This woman is an active duty officer, which means she's not just legally residing here, she's federally protected under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. You've been harassing a military officer." Karen's mouth hung open. "You also filed a false police report, attempted to intimidate a service member, and may be facing charges related to civil harassment and discrimination under federal law," the officer added. Karen's face turned ghostly. I didn't know. She never said." "You never asked," my wife replied coolly. Karen stumbled back a step, speechless for the first time in weeks. "You messed with the wrong house," my wife added. Karen had no idea what was still coming. Karen thought the humiliation at the hands of the sheriff was the worst of it. She had no clue what was about to unfold next. The sheriff filed an official report that night, documenting Karen's baseless claims, her harassment, and her attempt to evict an active duty military officer from her legal residence. That triggered a formal review from the HOA board, something Karen had arrogantly believed she controlled. The next HOA meeting was packed. Neighbors we'd barely spoken to before showed up, murmuring as the meeting started. Karen strutted in late, trying to hold her usual dominant posture, but the room had shifted. My wife and I sat in the front row. The HOA president cleared his throat and read the statement. "In light of recent events, we've launched a review of board member conduct. The complaints, along with police and legal documentation, leave us with no choice." Karen interrupted. "Wait, this is about her? You're siding with..." He didn't let her finish. "You harassed a decorated military officer, attempted to have her evicted without due process, and misrepresented HOA authority to law enforcement. You're removed from the board, effective immediately." Karen gasped. "You can't do that. I built this board." "No," the treasurer chimed in. "You built a mess, and now you're done." She stormed out of the meeting, but it wasn't over. The next week, the sheriff's department served her with court documents. My wife had filed a civil suit, defamation, harassment, emotional distress, and given her military status, the courts took it very seriously. Karen's HOA legal protection didn't cover intentional misconduct. The day of court, Karen tried to look composed, but her voice trembled the entire time. The judge awarded my wife $45,000 in damages. Karen broke down crying right there in front of everyone. The cherry on top, the HOA insurance refused to cover her legal fees. She was on her own. Word spread fast. Neighbors began avoiding her. Her car was vandalized, not by us, but by someone clearly fed up. She put her house up for sale 3 weeks later, listed well below market just to escape. My wife, she went right back to sipping her tea on the porch like nothing ever happened. Calm, untouchable, unbothered. Karen learned the hard way. You don't start wars you can't finish. And definitely not with someone who's trained to win them. The end.